Thank you. At this time, we will have the report by Chief of Staff and Administration.
Good evening again. I wanted to start the report with the preliminary accounting of the Fund 224. As promised, we are providing the information that we've learned so far as it relates to Fund 224. Whitaker and Company has started an analysis of that fund with the primary focus to determine the difference between the bank account balance and the general ledger balance. The difference is approximately $4 million, and they have compared all transactions from January 1st, 2015 through March 31st, 2018, comparing the bank transactions to the general ledger transactions. They look to identify were there any transactions that occurred in the bank that did not occur on the general ledger, and were there any transactions that occurred in the general ledger that did not occur in the bank account. They identify a variety of transactions that occurred in the bank account that did not occur on the general ledger. 58% of those transactions went to cover payroll expenses. So about $4.5 million went to cover payroll expenses. About $1.2 million went to the Blight Elimination Fund. That is where the hardest hit dollars are. The hardest hit program is a reimbursement account, so the monies were spent and then they have to be reimbursed by those dollars. The balance was transferred to the distribution account. 224 is a sub-account that's part of a group account Bank 10. Any checks that go out of these special revenue accounts do not go directly out of 224. They have to be moved to the distribution account and then checks written right out of that. What they found, however, in some cases, is that expenses that were related to 224 were just written directly out of the distribution account. For instance, there was $1 million written to a vendor for the replacement of some equipment. That money should have flowed through the 224 account, but it went just directly from a disbursement account. So the recommendation is to make corrected entries in the general ledger so that they accurately reflect the activity that occurred. Now, what we also know is the time frame that was done was, as I mentioned, January of 15 through March of 18. We know that just by doing a sampling of some of the prior years that it goes back further than that. So we are trying to determine what is the right time frame to look at to best capture the activity from both accounts. In addition, what we also know, there are 146 funds in the Special Revenue Bank 10 group. And we know that it occurred not only in 224, but in others of those funds. So we're doing an analysis of all of the funds to ensure that all of the transactions are accurately reflected on the general ledger. So this is the beginning of the report. It is not final because clearly there's additional work to be done. So as that work is completed, we will provide additional updates. This information has been shared with the council. The mayor thought it was important to also share it with the public, but there will be more to come.
So at this time, there are no funds that have been misappropriated. The funds have been taken and spent on payroll and the things you just outlined.
We have found no evidence that any of the dollars were spent on, that all of the dollars were spent on legitimate city expenses. It is true, however, that funds that were transferred out of the 224 that were used for expenses that are not defined by the ordinance should have come before the council. And in at least some cases, we know that did not happen. But we did not see where any of the funds were spent on non-city expenses.
So just for the public hearing, any funds that was needed by the executive branch for any expenditure should have come before the city council. Now, the fund that's set up is a special use fund where it's meant for the fire department and EMS to be used only. But those funds can be reallocated a different route, but they have to come before the city council to get approval or not approval to do it. And the problem is it did not go through the channels that it should have by coming through the city council to getting those approvals. But what we're seeing is that these funds were used for payroll and other related expenses that was pointed out by Chief of Staff.
Mr. President.
Is there any questions by council members? Councilwoman White have floor.
Councilwoman who?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Councilwoman Wade, I'm sorry, Wade.
And just especially for the young people, a non-reverting fund means that that particular fund can only be used for the purposes for which it was intended. So that in this situation, you've got fire and ambulance EMS services. So anything concerning that particular line item, you can't send it back to the general fund. You can't pay other people's payroll. Some payroll you can pay out of it. That's the civilian paramedics. And that is what comes out of this fund. But the $4.5 million in payroll for the rest of the city, it was inappropriate for them to use that particular fund to pay for other departments without coming before the council. So we want everybody to understand that this is still not acceptable and it's still not even legal. So at the end of the day, when I asked in our executive session, well, are we going to get the money back to the fire department? The answer is no. The answer actually was, where are we going to get it from? Okay, that money is gone. I wish we could, you know, find some money somewhere, but that money is gone. And if we reduce professional services, that money can come back. Yep. Okay, so there is a way. If we reduce professional services, all of these consultants that we hire, that we can send that money back to our fire department. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Is there any other questions?
Mr. President.
Councilwoman White.
The Chief of Staff, perhaps I didn't hear correctly or you misspoke, but I heard you say that there was a $4 million difference, but then 4.5 of it went to payroll. So what is the actual difference between the city's books and the bank statements?
So Councilwoman White, as of 12/31/2017, the difference was $4.4 million. But when we looked at the period from January of 15 through March of 18, we found transactions that were beyond the $4.4 million that is the difference at 12/31, which is why we also know that the difference goes further back. So even when we reconcile that entire period of time, the transactions do not make up the exact difference, which tells us that this activity occurred even prior to 15.
Okay, so if you, so when you looked at the books, did you look at them just for 2017 and that's when you came to the 4.4 million?
That is the difference as of 12/31/2017.
But that's the difference from January 2015 to 12/31/17?
No, ma'am. When I look at if I look at the balance on the bank statement on 12/31/17 and the balance on the general ledger on 12/31/17, the difference between those is $4.4 million. When I add up the differences in transactions from January of 15 through March of 18, the end of March of 18,
it is in excess of the 4.4 million, which tells us that there are transactions prior to 15 that would also make up that balance difference, going in both directions, and that's why it's a net of those numbers. So transactions in both directions that will make up the difference. Now the question is, how far back do we have to go, and we're not sure of that yet.
Okay, and just one other point. You mentioned that 58% was used for payroll, and then Blight Elimination got 1.5 million. Can you just give us the percentages of, you know, the big transfers? Like, do you have the percentage for Blight Elimination?
It was for Blight Elimination, it was 17%.
17%.
Yes.
And then for the special revenue fund?
For the distribution account, it was the 25%.
25%. Okay, thank you.
Mr. President.
And just to point something else out, it appears in some cases the money was returned to EMS account. Not in every case, but we have to go again through more transactions even further back to see which ones were returned, which ones were not. Which ones were not spent on EMS expenses and which ones were. So we have to still complete that part of the analysis to determine which ones will require council action. We have to, we've identified the transactions during that period of time that we need to make correcting entries for. What we still need to identify is which ones will require council action at this time, and then how far back we need to go.
Councilman Smith?
Yes, sir, Mr. President, Cash. From the research I did, and what I was able to uncover, and just listening to Chief of Staff, there are transactions that go back further than the last year or so. Well, from the information that I was able to gather, there used to be an ordinance that allowed this. There was an ordinance that allowed this. So to say all of this is illegal or was in a non-reverting fund is not true. Because there was an ordinance that allowed the city to dip into the fire department fund and use it in the general fund. So, you know, when you start explaining this stuff and start making it look like there's a big fire here, you gotta say it all. You gotta put it all out there. So, I'm still talking. And the only thing I'm saying that there was an ordinance that allowed this type of transactions. And we know that a lot of folks move on past practice. At the time a transaction is needed to run the city, as far as making payroll, what do you do? I mean, do you just let the whole thing crumble and then people go to the bank and their check won't cash? I mean, what do you do? So, I'm not saying what, some of this was illegal, wasn't legal, because some of it was clearly not appropriate. I won't say illegal, I just say not appropriate. But there's a bigger picture here, and it's just like the Chief of Staff outlined. It goes back a lot further than you're hearing today. And if you're gonna hear this, hear all of it. And you know, we have a bad habit of going on past practices. And whether it was right or wrong, if you work for the city and you received a paycheck and you went to Chase Bank and it didn't cash, I mean, what do you do? So I don't look at this as some type of nefarious activity. We have a city that's in financial problems that's been ongoing for a long time. And we're starting to come to an end. And we're trying to work diligently to come up with some solutions. And the optimum word here is coming to a head. this goes back a long way, where people have abused and used money and just did whatever they wanted to do. And now we're trying to find enough manpower and shovels to dig our way out of it. So the point I'm just trying to make that, and I'm not trying to be redundant, I'm tired, I'm sorry. Hear all of it, that's all. Have an open mind. I don't look at this as somebody stealing his money and put $5 million in their pocket. So, thank you.
Councilwoman White?
I can wait till everyone else.
Okay.
Mr.
Is
President?
anyone else that hasn't spoke that would like to speak before I go to the second round? Councilwoman White and Councilwoman Wade.
Okay. I understand what Councilman Smith was saying, but it was my understanding that none of this money came before the council for approval to use the non-reverting fund. I know that, we have done that in the past, but none of this money came, and that, that's why we're saying that it's not the appropriate process. So I just want to make that clear that it is still a problem. Thank you.
Mr. President, and this is why government doesn't work, is because we excuse inappropriate behavior. If I kept my books the way the city kept its books, then financially, the shoddy accounting that goes on, I wouldn't have anything. And so we can't allow excuses. You fix it. Our job here on this council, again, is to be a checks and balances. Not to agree with everything that goes on and say, well, it's going to be okay. We know, we were told in the meeting, in the executive meeting, where the money went. We don't disagree that people shouldn't get paid. Yes, they should get paid. But yes, you follow the rules. You follow the current law, what the current law says. Not some 20-year-old law or 30-year-old law, but what does the law say right now? And follow that. And we won't have any problems. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. And point well taken. Just to iterate, that it should have came before the city council. That's just the bottom line. It should have came before the city council. There was a need for the funds, and we don't disagree. As a group, there was a need for the funds, but the way it was done was not done right. And it wasn't a one offense, as we are seeing now as the days continue to go back years and years. It was something that continued to happen. This is something that could have got cleaned up a long time ago. If it was a problem, you could have brought it before the council. We have passed things on third and final reading, all three readings in a council meeting, if it's emergency basis where we need it. But the information was not brought to this body. So that's how come it becomes a serious problem with this body. We set the laws in place.